Hello everybody, welcome back to the e-learning space for MGM Higher Secondary School, Bokaro. This is the second video for Unit 2, Section A, English Class 8 Coursebook. As we discussed, Unit 2 is about nature and love for nature. Our Section A is a poetry that we read in our last class, Portrait of a Prince, written by Dennis Martindale. In our last video, we read the poem and understood the poem. The poet Dennis Martindale has described the beauty, the magnificence, and the characteristics of a wild tiger. He paints the picture of a tiger in such a way that it equals portraying the picture of a prince. Let us understand the title of the poem once again. The poem is titled Portrait of a Prince. In this poem, the poet Dennis Martindale paints the portrait of a tiger with his words. The stanzas are quite vivid with description. Vivid means almost lifelike, very much relatable to reality. Just as princes are royal and so get themselves painted on a canvas, in the same way the poet wants to immortalize the regal beast in the canvas of his poem. You must have children come across the paintings or pictures of kings and queens and princes. This was a normal activity that was undertaken by the royal people to get themselves painted or get their portraits made. So in this poem, the poet Dennis Martindale has painted the picture of a tiger with his words, and he believes a tiger is royalty. He is actually a sovereign beast, and hence he describes in the poem the tiger as he does. Moving on, let us now discuss the critical appreciation. Critical appreciation simply means whatever poem or prose you have read, we are going to delve deeper into it. We are going to perform surgery on it, let's say. We have to find out the rhythm, the rhyme scheme, the pattern of the words, what are the poetic devices, the figures of speech, what metaphorical meaning is lying in the poem, and everything else. So we know the poem is titled Portrait of a Prince. It is written by Dennis Martindale, right? And it has how many stanzas? 8 stanzas. And each stanza has 4 lines. While reading the poem, we saw that the rhyme scheme of the poem is A, B, A, B, which means the first and the third line rhyme with each other, and the second and the fourth line rhyme with one another. Now, when we read the poem, we have understood the entire poem is descriptive. The poet is describing a tiger, his sense of sight, his sense of smell, his appearance, his sense of vision, all the other characteristics that he finds very striking, or the qualities which he finds very impressive in the tiger. And of course, the poem is a nature poetry, specifically based on the theme of wildlife. Wildlife is obviously a part of nature. So any poetry that describes nature or talks about the elements of nature is a nature poetry. Such a poetry is also called a romantic poetry. So this is a romantic descriptive poetry based on the theme of wildlife. You have to remember this. Now, when we read the poem, we also see one striking feature. What is that? All the 8 stanzas are beginning with the same word, behold. Now, this is an example of an anaphora. Anaphora simply means a word that is repeated in the beginning of sentences. The poet equates the tiger to a prince. In the title itself, the poet says, Portrait of a Prince. And when we read the poem, we understand who the prince is. It is the tiger. So he is equating or comparing a tiger to a prince. This is a metaphor. In other lines also in the poem, he says, it is a regal animal, it is a sovereign being. All these are synonyms for the word royal or king-like, or from the royal blood. So all these are metaphors, and the title itself is metaphorical. We are not actually going to talk about a prince, but an animal which is almost equal to a prince. Next, another poetic device that the poet has used is alliteration. And by now, children, we already know what is alliteration since we have started reading poetry. Alliteration simply means when a sound word is repeated, or a sound is repeated in the beginning of adjacent words, means near to words. For example, in the poem we find the words ears erect. So the sound of E is coming from two words which are lying closely to each other, and the sound should be in the beginning, not in the middle. Be wise, beware. The sound of B is coming from these two words which are closely lying to each other. He hides his. So here also the her sound is coming one after the other in the beginning of the adjacent words. So these are examples of alliteration, and there are many other examples which you will have to find once again when you read the poetry. Tails, those, teeth. The t sound is coming at the beginning of these words. Moving on, another poetic device that is being used by the poet in the poem Portrait of a Prince is personification. Look at stanza 3. What tales those teeth could tell. Teeth is not a separate entity that will talk. A human talks, but we cannot think about teeth talking. So when he says that what tales those teeth could tell, he is actually personifying the teeth. He is giving lifelike qualities to an inanimate object. Hence, in this line we have personification. You understand the meaning of personification? When an inanimate object is given lifelike qualities or qualities of a living being to make the poem more aesthetically pleasing or to just beautify the poem. The poem has a rhythm. The lines alternate between 8 syllables and 6 syllables. While reading the poetry, we understood this as well. Even in the textual exercises, there's a question related to this and we discussed it. Rhythm means the syllables are balanced in such a way that there's a beat, almost a song-like quality. We can read the poem along with the beats and it will be very rhythmic. So it is because it is balanced between 8 and 6 syllables. Now about the poem, we are accustomed to getting frightened by tigers because of their appearances. They have sharp canines, they have very sharp and deadly claws, they run very fast, they are apex predators, they hunt others, they prey on the other animals and humans in fact. So it is our automatic reaction when we talk about tigers. But the poem entitled Portrait of the Prince by Dennis Martindale has a deeper depiction of tigers. It is not shown as something that is vicious, although it is shown as something very powerful, but not as something that one is very frightened of. In fact, it almost talks about it with respect. The poem is almost talking about the tiger with respect and awe and inspiration. It describes not just the physical appearance of a tiger, but also its deep characteristics, mentally and emotionally. It highlights the other side of a tiger, not just its scary face, but also its heroic side. Like I said, it is not only telling that the tiger is vicious and frightening, it is also telling how the tiger is heroic, how it is brave, how it is prince-like. It has a graceful side. It is mentally adept. It knows how, when and where the things are. Still, it maintains its poise very calmly until it is needed to attack somebody or someone. The first part of the poem focuses on the detailed physical appearance of a tiger, not just mere definition, but each trait that a tiger has, different important functions as well as symbolisms like this line from the poem. So we find there is symbolism in the poem. Let's see what it is. Behold the tiger's face up close with all its deep-edged lines, like charcoal ridges by his nose, how clearly each defines. Behold the tiger's ears erect, aware of all that breathes. So it is describing the physical features, of course, but it is not just the physical features. By describing these physical features, the poet is telling, look at the beauty of the tiger. When you look closely, it looks like those dark lines are drawn by charcoal. And he is aware of everything around himself. He is mentally very agile. He is able to hear distant things. He knows who is breathing away, who is walking, who is coming, what hooves are around him. So he is a very agile animal. So it is not just the beauty or the physical characteristic, but by these lines the poet is trying to symbolize the beauty and the elegance and the magnificence of a tiger. In the second part, the mental power of a tiger is described. Look at this line. With mental filters that select the rustling of the leaves. So this does not only tell that the tiger has sharp sense of hearing, it also tells that it is mentally very fit. It is able to distinguish that which are the sounds of the leaves just moving in the wind and which are the sounds of actually some prey coming forward or some danger coming forward. It tells us how intelligent a tiger can be. He can identify the distant facts, the things that are quite distant from him. In the third part, the poet concludes by saying how a tiger can be so powerful, it can sense if there is an existing danger. It also said that tigers always win because they are powerful physically, in their mind and soul. When the poem ends, we see that the poet is telling us that if a person and a tiger will race, it will be the tiger who will always win. So one has to be careful, because a tiger is not just physically powerful, it also has the power of the mind and the soul. He is a very well balanced creature. So this also tells us that the way the tigers are being hunted by human beings, their numbers are decreasing day by day. They are becoming endangered species. But man has to understand that this is a predator, and that too an apex predator, one of the tertiary creatures of the jungle, and it is very well created by nature. It is physically strong, it is mentally agile, and its soul is in the right place. So if the tiger wants, it can seriously injure us or maim us. So man has to be careful, respect this being for its beauty, for its magnificence, for all the striking characteristics, and understand that every animal has a right to live. We should not poach these animals. We should not unnecessarily hunt these animals or illegally use them. It was emphasized with this line on the poem, behold the tiger's neck so still and poised with regal grace, portraying here the prince's will despite the human race. Behold the tiger's sovereign style. So here again the poet is telling that maybe the humans consider themselves one of the most tertiary beings and they think they are in control of the nature and environment, but no. One has to be careful and exercise control, because here is a beast, here is an animal that is so sure of itself, and yet it maintains a regal and poised and calm grace. And this is what the humans should learn, how to maintain grace and poise and calm. It tells that a tiger isn't just a scary animal, it is powerful in all aspects and is an example of a hero. The poem just simplifies to wants to describe the tiger as model of being a hero. So over here in this poem, even though the poet is describing everything about the poet, physical appearance, mental power, and its well balanced poise, it is also telling us that the tiger is a hero. And we can clearly understand this from the title itself. In the title itself, the poet has described it as a prince who is born of royalty, a prince who has courage to fight nations. So this is what the idea is in the poem, that the tiger is a hero and it can easily take over things if it wants to. So man has to be careful in the way it deals with a tiger or approaches a tiger, the beast of the jungle. Now coming to the last part of the poem, it says, "Behold the tiger's treachery, flee from his handsome grin, for in a race I think you will see that tigers always win." The same thing, the tiger may appear calm and poised, but it is a vicious beast. It can easily break your trust and it can easily hunt you down. Even when it is grinning, you have to be careful. It cannot be befriended as such. Now it clearly shows how powerful a tiger can be, and it can easily fight for himself and for other animals. That brings us to the end of the lesson. Now let me remind you, we have read the poem, we have understood the poem, we have also discussed the textual exercises in our last video. So here is a list of assignments that you have to complete from this chapter. The very first and the most important one, you will read the poem with all the correct pronunciation and in a very articulating manner. And if you have any issues, we'll discuss it in the online classes. Then you have to learn the word meanings that are there in the poem and given in the glossary at the end of the poem. You have to complete all the textual exercises in the book itself. Then you have to do exercises A and B in the English copy. You have to learn all the poetic devices that I have discussed in this video lesson. And after that, whatever you have understood by reading the poem, that you have to describe in the picture. You have to give a pictorial representation based on your understanding of the poem. Whatever you have understood while reading the poem, whatever comes to your mind, that you have to draw, and if you can color it, that would be good. Thank you everyone. Take care. See you in our next video lesson.